There's a state of being that most people aren't able to access that can totally change your life experience. Now, it may seem like I'm setting this up to talk about spiritual awakening, but actually I'm talking about something that's even more attainable: neutrality. Now, neutrality may not seem all that important until you start to think about how reactive we often are to other people and situations, how much energy we spend trying to control totally uncontrollable things when we start to spin in our heads with worry, and how we can take things so very, very personally when most of the time they ultimately have nothing to do with us at all. So did you know that neutrality is actually a state of frequency resonance that's absolutely critical for spiritual awakening? In this episode, we talk about what neutrality really is, why it's so important, and how to get there. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part. The group frequency calibration associated with this episode is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. If you like this episode, please help us out by hitting the like and the subscribe buttons. It helps us get our content to more people like you. My name is Karen Cheong, and today in Mastering Your World Through Frequencies, we're discussing a key state of being: neutrality.
So we're going to talk about neutrality today. There's lots of definitions on what neutrality is, and I'm sure all of them have got some sort of aspect of truth in it. But since you're the one that's going to talk about this, what would you define neutrality as, and why do we care? Can't we just get pissed off when we want to get pissed off?
Okay, so neutrality, a lot of people, what I'll say first is they make a mistake. They think neutrality means non-emotional. Okay, that's not what it means. So from my perspective, neutrality means that you are high enough in your frequency resonance, meaning you've released enough of your distortion patterns, that you actually are embodying a state of resonance where you are truly okay with what is. Meaning you're okay with whatever outcome happens. You're okay with the emotions of the people in the room around you. You can be in that space and not be triggered.
Okay, all right. So just to backtrack a wee bit, you said a lot of people think it's about not having emotion. But what I'm hearing is, okay, there's all this stuff happening, there's chaos, there's emotions flying around, but it's okay to feel. Can you do both? I think that's the question.
Yes.
Can you still get upset but still be neutral?
Yes.
About the whole thing?
Yes, absolutely. So you can be neutral and have emotion. And the thing is, neutrality means that a number of things. So one is that you're not particularly attached. So meaning you're not attached to someone else feeling a certain way. You're not attached to them agreeing with you. You're not attached to a certain outcome happening. So you're not like vested in all that happening. You can have a preference, but it's not like a strong attachment or a need for that thing to happen for you to feel in equilibrium or to feel good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what I think I'm hearing you saying is, you have your feelings and your desires and your wants, and you can get really like excited about it. But if it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen, then you're still okay.
Exactly.
You do lose your equilibrium, like you say.
Exactly.
And you still stay sound and centered.
Exactly. Because the thing is, we're funny as humans. We can often attach to our emotion. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but like, let's just say one day you wake up and you're pissed off, right? Like those days you just happen in the world and you wake up and today you are cranky pants.
Never.
And then if you've noticed, like, people around you who care about you and love you, and they notice that you're in a cranky pants state, may try to help you to alleviate your suffering. And so, for example, my husband Chris will do this with me. And I know that in the past especially, I would hang on to that cranky pants state. It's like he was trying to help, but I'd be like, stop trying to help me. I don't know why you think there's something wrong. You know what I mean? I would kind of go into the, and clearly, he's trying to help me to shift my state because the emotional state I'm in is obviously not helping me, nor is it helping anyone around me. But the thing is, we can attach to our emotion. So what I mean, another example of that would be like, let's imagine you're in traffic and you're driving along and someone like just really in a very jerky way just cuts you off. and you know that they did it. So it wasn't like a whoops, I didn't see you there. It was like, I made eye contact with you and I cut you off anyway, right? So the thing is, you can really stew about that. And the original response of fear and anger is the emotional response, right? Like my life is being threatened. So of course I have an emotional response. But the 5 hours later, when you're still stewing about it and now telling everyone else about it, that is our attachment to that emotion. It's like a mental attachment to that emotion. And so when you're in neutrality, you have that flash of anger, you have that fear because you are human, and then it goes away. Right? So you're not attached to having that anger and then telling everyone else about it and like perpetuating it through your day. So that's what I mean by neutrality, is you have emotionality, but it's not like you hang on to it in the same way that we tend to when we're not in the state of neutrality.
And would you also add, or could you say as well, when these emotions come up, it's just about not even being ashamed or worried or in anxiety about these emotions. It's just a human moment.
Yeah, exactly. And what's wonderful about it is that you can express emotion without needing to know why. So the funny thing about us as humans is we like to have meaning and we like to know why. And sometimes we're just emotional. And it's okay that we don't know why. And the wonderful thing about having more and more neutrality is you become okay with your emotional state. So that's why you can have more vulnerability, because in that, it's not like you're pretending to have a vulnerability or you're crying or whatever. It's just like, it's okay that you're having this moment where you are vulnerable and you're crying, for example, right? Yeah. So that's happened to me in events, and I just have it, and then it passes, and then I move on. It's not because I'm trying to suppress it. It's because that's what arose, and I'm moving through it. Yeah. And it's the same thing, not just for sadness. It could be with happiness or joyfulness or disgust or whatever it is. It's like all that stuff can arise and you're okay with it because you don't need to know why. And you're not attached to having the emotion. And there's no like negative association to emotion like you just described, like shame or inappropriateness or guilt or whatever the thing is that you might have around it. So you come to this place where not only are you neutral with regards to your own emotional state, you become more neutral with everyone else's emotional state too, which is really lovely. Meaning, if someone who's close to you is having a meltdown, I'm not suggesting that you're callous and you don't care and you don't try to help. No. You offer those tools, and if they reject them, it's not that it's personal to you, because some of us sometimes when we offer to help and they're like, I don't want it, you're like, well, screw you. Yeah. I'm trying to help you here. You know what I mean? You can get like, I don't know if anyone's had this other than me, but we can get very vested in our attempt to help and what it means and all that sort of stuff. So it's sort of like, okay, you offer the tools, you offer support. If it's a no, it's a no. Yeah. So it's like, it's okay that they are having that emotion of frustration or anger or fear. You can be with it and hold your space and not have it affect you because it's not yours, it's theirs.
Yeah, and if you're in neutrality, you can recognize that. So I'm thinking this segues into why is it so important to be neutral, because it sounds divine to have that neutrality because, it means that you can stay in your frequency resonance and keep it high, I'm guessing. Yeah. So that's why neutrality is so important,
yes,
right?
Exactly. And the wonderful thing about neutrality also is it allows you to notice things about yourself and about others because it's not as charged. So if you take the charge out of things, you can notice a lot of things about yourself that you wouldn't have noticed before when you were getting all flummoxed because you took something personally, or you got really angry because you assumed somebody meant this. Or do you know what I mean? Like we make all kinds of assumptions and project things. I mean, we're human. But the wonderful thing about neutrality is as you enter the state and as it deepens, because it deepens as your frequency resonance rises, you can notice things, like I said, about yourself in a way that isn't self-judgmental, which is so key because we often will beat ourselves up. It's like, I suck because, again, I had low self-worth. Why didn't I speak up in that moment? I was so ashamed to express my idea. Whatever it is, like we beat ourselves up. But if you have neutrality, you can be like, that's interesting. In that moment, I didn't feel like I could express myself. Okay. So I wonder where the distortion pattern is that caused that. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. It gives you that distance to be able to observe yourself without all the charge. And it gives you distance to be able to observe other people and relationship and patterns. So it's really lovely because it actually, to me, fosters more compassion because you're like, oh, that's actually not personal to me. They're doing this behavior, which is kind of terrible. But when I'm watching it, and it's not just with me, it's with everyone else, and they're just like blazing a trail of hurt for themselves and everyone else. I'm like, God, that's gotta suck. You know what I mean? But it gives you a sense of like, okay, I can observe them in a way that's not just taking it as like a hurt to me.
Yeah, and what I've experienced when I've been able to hold my neutrality, you know, you approach the person and you see if you check them out. Do they want some help right now?
Yeah.
And you might get the rejection. And other folk might come and do the same thing and they react to it. But when I'm the neutral one, what ends up happening is that person comes to me thereafter and says, hey, can we chat?
Yes.
Because I've held that space of neutrality and now they are ready. They want to talk to somebody that, I don't know why. Is it trust? What is it?
It's because it's a clear space where they can have whatever emotion they want to have. So if you're in neutrality, it gives, and you're holding it, it gives them permission to be who they are and have the emotion that they need to in that moment because they know there's no judgment. It's just clear. It's like, I'm present with you, period. That's it. So I'm here witnessing you. And you can have what you experience that you need to have in this moment because I am not attached to you being fixed, feeling better, feeling worse, doing this. It's literally like I can just be with you. So what's wonderful when you hold that field of neutrality is people will kind of figure things out on their own because you're holding that field, meaning that you're holding that resonance of neutrality and it gives them the opportunity to observe themselves that they don't have normally, right? It gives them clarity and permission to have that experience. And I think, you know, it's funny in our culture, we always want people to fix us or to save us or whatever. But I can tell you it is so much more profound when you discover it for yourself. Like when the person themselves is like, oh my God, I just had this really profound realization. It is like worth mountains more than someone telling you this is the way it is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's come back to frequency and frequency resonance. And let's talk about the importance of neutrality and how it impacts our own personal frequency resonance.
Yeah. So like I said, it can be your most valuable tool because it allows you to observe and notice yourself, right? Where are the patterns? It gives you distance from your emotion. Now, I just want to put a little caveat in here. Some people will chase neutrality because they don't want to deal with their feelings.
So like bypassing?
Yes.
All right.
They're just like, okay, I don't like this feeling. It terrifies me. It's really deep. So I'm just going to chase neutrality, right? Because then I won't feel it. So notice if you're doing that, because that's not really neutrality. That's dissociation. Okay?
Bypassing.
Yeah, exactly. Dissociation, bypassing.
Because neutrality, like we said earlier, is about being able to sit in that emotion and not feel the horrible shame, guilt, fear, whatever list that comes up.
And just have the emotion.
Be with it.
Yeah, exactly. And so neutrality is really important first because it's a resonance thing to begin with. Okay, to me, it's a state of resonance. You can't think your way there. You can't hope to get there. You can't try to like shift your emotions so that you're there. It literally has to do with clearing enough of your distortion that you have like enough of a level of clarity that as you come into your center, that's the whole point. You're in your center.
Yeah.
So you have this neutrality that, like I said, it can advance you because you observe self. You can have distance from your own triggers and notice how they affect you and how they affect other people, and then be able to start to feel your own distortion because you're like, I'm neutral, but there's this thing that keeps hitting me over here. Like, what is that thing? Why does it keep bothering me? Because I'm not neutral when it comes to this thing. Well, that's kind of fascinating. Here I'm not. Like usually I can be, but bothering me a lot over here. So that's helpful information. And also it allows you, like I said, to see triggers when other people trigger you. Because if you're in a state of neutrality, you really know when you're triggered. So that is super helpful. And it allows you to be in a state of like greater surrender. Now,
that's what I was wondering, if we're going to go to that level of, we're at the very human level on how neutrality is important for frequency resonance, but we always have this relationship with the one.
Yes.
This relationship with Creator, pure source. And I'm wondering with this whole, if we are in this space of neutrality, surely then, if, because it sounds like a safe heaven. You can watch your emotions come up and leave, come up and leave. You can watch others come up and leave. There must be this strength in that connection to pure source at that point.
Absolutely.
I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. And the thing is, when you come into this neutral state, you are able to, at least for me, what happened for me, because I was so attached a lot, okay? So I ran a lot of fear. So just for context, right? My I don't know what it is with Asians, but like we run a lot of fear. Like I've noticed that in my clients as well. But anyway, I had a lot of fear patterns, and as I started to clear, I started to come into a neutral state without trying to. It wasn't like I was like, okay, number one goal for this week, hit a neutrality. It just kind of happened without me really realizing that it was happening.
Because you did the work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And I was just confirming, removing the distortion pattern.
Yeah.
And then at some point for me, the big moment for me is when I realized I have to stop controlling, like not just about removing confirming the removal of the patterns. I actively have to surrender here.
Yes.
You know, I have to, okay, yes, I've released a lot of these patterns of fear and control, but now I intentionally want to move into surrender in terms of surrendering my will to that of pure source. Okay, like truly. And it was the first time that I'd really kind of done that. And there's a strange marriage between neutrality and surrender, in my experience, where when you move into that surrender state, you kind of enter this field of neutrality because you realize it's not about your own will, what it is that you think is best, what it is that you want in the same way, because you've surrendered your will to pure source. It doesn't mean you don't have preference. It doesn't mean that you don't want to create certain things in the world. But it means that you recognize that there is something far greater than you, and that the divine unfolding of what is there as a gift for you. And you may not know all the little pieces, but it's there for you. And when that happens, at least my experience of it, as you enter that surrender state, you enter a deeper sense of neutrality. Because at that point, your relationship with what is happening in your life changes, because it's not, you kind of like release your attachment in a way, you know?
Yeah, I think if I was to describe it for what you've said and my experience, it would be, okay, I wish I could have this. I'm going to work towards that. Yeah. But even if it doesn't look like that, and it doesn't sound like that or smell like that, but it still gives me that same satisfied feeling, then that's all right, because I understand that the power of creation and that divine connection is always striving for the best version of me, as I am. So that's my sense of neutrality with all that. It's like, okay, I'm just going to do my bit, and then we'll see what happens.
Exactly. And I think with neutrality, and a key thing that you just raised is, as humans, we always think we know what we want. Or we think that we know what's best for us. Like, it's a tendency that we have. That's the whole I'm right. We like to be right. And often, as the Rolling Stones so famously said, it's not always what you need. You know? And the thing is, for those of you who are rising in your frequency resonance, there are things that you're going to experience for you to choose a higher resonance, meaning to choose a higher vibrating order. And sometimes that looks like challenge, and sometimes that looks like grief, and sometimes that looks like fear. And what will happen is, as you transcend it by choosing a higher vibrating order of resonance, by using your tools, you know, we've talked about this a lot for mastering momentum, the 6 core essentials, or choosing the higher resonating version of self. What happens is, as you move up, you start to drop what I mentioned before, your own will, like what you think is correct for you, what you think is the best outcome, what you think is right in the sense of, in terms of your trajectory. Because we tend to, as humans, really like ease, and we like comfort, and we like things to be like, you know, like a cat lying in the sun. You know what I mean? We like that. I mean, who doesn't? It's amazing. And there's also this certain degree of challenge that we require in order to continue to grow. And so when you come into this state of neutrality, you recognize, even though it's challenging and even though it's hard, that you are being given the opportunity to grow. Because you know what I mean? It doesn't have all that same charge around it.
Yeah.
So by surrendering your will, which sounds terrifying, I realize it was for me, you enter that state of neutrality where you're like, okay, I am strong enough to transcend this. It's sort of like coupled, it's sort of a trifecta, right? It's like neutrality, surrender from strength, and this knowingness of your own strength.
Trust.
Yeah, trust in yourself that you can actually transcend.
Yeah.
So those three things kind of happen at the same time.
Okay, so what are we going to do the GFC on then?
Yes, as I mentioned before, the GFC meditation is really important because getting to neutrality is not possible with just your mind. You can't think your way there. You can't feel your way there. It really, truly has to do with a certain level of frequency resonance. So the GFC is really important. And in this particular one, what we're going to do is help to release the distortion patterns that keep you from being in neutrality.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the other thing we're going to do is, for those of you who feel, I'll pull you into that state, for even if it's just for a second or two. So some of you who are real feelers will be able to feel what that feels like, as opposed to having it as a mental construct that you think you know what it is.
That'll help us in train
Yes.
further.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Shall we get to it then?
So for those of you who would like to begin your journey into neutrality, I highly recommend listening to the group frequency calibration meditation associated with this episode. And if you know somebody who could use help with this, please share this episode with them. We're about to start the group frequency calibration, or GFC, where we actually do the frequency work and change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear on the right or the link in the description below. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.